Well, good day and welcome to you. It is actually Friday the 13th. And I hope you're having a lucky Friday the 13th wherever you happen to be. Now, if you're not listening to it on the 13th of August, well, hopefully you're having a great day wherever you happen to be. Now, if you are new to this channel, my name is Gary Willing, and here we talk about the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. Now, we talk about why are they coming back now? Why is it important that they do so at this particular time? And of course, what does it mean for you and everyone else that they're doing this? Now, hopefully you'll listen to this video all the way through because I actually have an article that I want to read that actually talks about why are they coming back now. So hopefully we'll listen to that. Now, I have some comments to address and a question to answer. I always like to lay it out there for anyone to ask a question, post a comment if it pertains to this information and it helps to all of us to kind of get to know more about this information. Then we'll talk about it in the next video. That's why I like questions and comments. You can email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. But, you know, whether you're someone who likes to post comments and then hear the answer, or if you're someone who doesn't really like to do that, I really recommend checking out the links that I provided in the description portion of this video. And in each and every video, I put these links in there because they give really good background information about what we talk about here. It's a great resource to find out more information about Maitreya, about his teachings, about his priorities that he's already laid out for humanity, of course. You can see images of these miracles that we talk about that I think are teaching humanity that we are one. And also, as you start to look at this information, hopefully that you'll look at the problems that are facing humanity today, the environment, the political problems, the economic divisions, and so forth. And if you look at it from just an hypothesis, like a scientist, if you look at it from just a slightly different angle, ask yourself this question after hearing this information. Are these problems really teaching humanity that we are one? And that's the main thing that I like to talk about, because I do think they're teaching us that we're one. But just you look at it from a hypothetical standpoint and look at these, and do some research on the environment, on those kind of things, and see if what I'm saying is true. Are these problems like the environment teaching humanity that we are one? They're happening to every single person. They're affecting each and every one of us. Each and every one of us are to blame for, let's say, the environmental problem, whether it's a lot or a little, right? We have to do something about it. Each and every one of us have to do something about solving that problem. And then ask yourself this question. Is it going to be just as severe as everyone is saying, as even Maitreya is saying it's going to be, if we do not do something about the environment? And where this information fits in, okay, so this is where it's important, I think, for you to look at it from this standpoint. And if you've heard this information before, heard these videos before, you might be going, there he goes again. But it's important that we look at this. The principle of sharing, as Maitreya says, is the crucial first step that we have to do as a people in order to even solve the environmental problem, because it's going to take nations trusting one another. This is why it's so important. This is why this information, if you investigate it for yourself and look at this information from a non-religious viewpoint, perhaps it could help you to see it a little bit better, that we need to do something about the environment. But we're not, right? Nations aren't working together to do anything about it. The only thing that's going to bring the nations together enough to solve the problems is to institute the principle of sharing. There's no other way, according to what the teacher's saying. And then if you look at the link that I provided about the Marshall Plan, now they talk about it from more of a Pax Americana, trying to stop the communist spread wave, the red wave across Europe back in the 40s, right after World War II. But if you look at the Marshall Plan, it did create trust amongst these nations, goodwill amongst the nations like the United States and Western Europe. It created trust amongst them, enough trust that if we did it globally, it would create enough trust rather quickly to help solve the problems in the environment. Look at the nations that participated in the Marshall Plan and ask yourself, had any one of them attacked each other, militarily since then? No. Do they trust one another better than any of the other nations on the planet? The answer to that question is yes. Can the people in those nations travel to those other nations easier than they can to other nations? The answer is, of course, yes. It's due to the principle of sharing. And then if you look at the historical aspect of Europe and European history before the Marshall Plan, you couldn't have answered to those questions in that way. It would have actually been the other way. It would have been yes, no, and no versus no, yes, yes. So you know what I mean? So it really, you look at it from that standpoint. And so my hope is not to get you to change your religious belief, but my hope is to get you to investigate this information, educate yourself on the problems that are facing humanity, and look at this information, and hopefully you'll feel a little bit more uplifted about the future. You know, give you a greater sense of hope about the future if you know this information on whatever you believe it, you know, hopefully that will be the case. But also, if you see that the problems are just as real as everyone is saying, and just as severe if we don't do something about it, that perhaps, not me, I'm not saying that I am inspiring you to do it, but this information could inspire you to do something about it, because we're going to have to do something together on it. So that's why it's important that I think that we know this information. So now let's get on into the comments. Now, I do have to apologize in advance for the first two comments, not because I think that they're bad comments, but because I just said that this really doesn't pertain to religion. And of course, the comments that mostly come my way have to do with religion. So, but I do think that he does talk about something that I do want to talk about, and where this information I think can kind of fit into it. So I know. It's totally different than what I just said, but it's not my fault, man. It's just the questions that come in, the comments that come my way. Now, this one comes from James Wambidi. And James, you personally, I apologize to you and thank you for your patience, because it's been 2 weeks since you posted this comment, and I put up other videos, and I haven't really addressed this comment yet. And I was just kind of waiting for the right time and enough time to really talk about it, because I do think you bring up some good points. All right, so first comment. Lord Maitreya, the Christ himself, and you don't have to believe that, this is just what he's saying, is not coming back with spectacular fireworks and trumpets to resurrect dead bodies whose souls have already gone to heaven or purgatory. The Vatican Catholic Church needs to re-edit the Bible once again. We'll talk about that in a bit. But let me read this other comment first. Lord Jesus was the beloved disciple of the Lord Maitreya, the Christ himself. Again, you don't have to believe that. That's just what he's saying. Lord Maitreya used the body of Jesus to preach. We'll talk about that. The Christian Bible should be re-edited once again to reflect the truth. The original Jewish name of Jesus should also be brought back. All right, now, in terms of the fanfare and the fireworks and all that kind of thing, I do think that is mainly coming from, wouldn't you agree, James, that it's basically symbology and revelation. Most of the Bible is symbology, if not distorted views, versions of symbology, but let's just call it how it is. It's mostly symbolic. There are some simple truths in there. We're going to talk about it in reference to your second comment. But when it comes to Revelation, I mean, it's almost all symbology. I mean, how could John had explained what he saw in terms of future events any other way, really? But he was explaining it symbolically. And I do think that one of, if not the biggest, really, misunderstandings and distortions about Revelation, is just something you think about. I'm just putting it out there for you. I'm not expecting you to take my word for it. Is most people view Revelation in a very short time frame, like maybe a few years. I think, 7 years is the most common interpretation of that view. They don't see it as he was talking about his time, talking about stuff that happened relatively recently ago, maybe 100 years from from now, right? What's happening and pertinent to today, but also what's going to be happening thousands of years from now. They see it all as one, like within just a few years. But esoterically, it's been said that he was talking about several thousand years. So that's where I think people are kind of caught up in it. The other thing too, that I do think that it proves that the Christ is already back in the world, is because people are so adamant about trying to find the Antichrist. And I get it all the time on my channel, but if you research it on YouTube, you'll see that I'm saying that's definitely true. You know what I'm saying? You might not believe everything else that I'm saying, but you'll see that there are people that think all sorts of people are the Antichrist. They're all looking for it. And I think that in their subconscious, perhaps, or in their heart of hearts, they actually are sensing that the Christ is already here, but they're misinterpreting their own intuition, and they're searching for the Antichrist first based on their misinterpretation of the timing of revelation. Because according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, the Antichrist has already come and gone. It happened during World War II with the Antichrist energy flowing through the Axis powers, but yet people don't see it like that. Now, in terms of the fanfare and the fireworks, there wasn't anything about Jesus' life that was full of fanfare and fireworks. He was always lived a very simple life. Why anybody would expect the Christ to live a different life today than I just don't understand why they would even think it. But it's so contrary to the way Jesus lived his life. Now, in terms of Maitreya working through Jesus, Jesus was a very advanced disciple at the time that he was in Palestine. Not quite a master, but very, very close. Maitreya worked through him telepathically and worked and gave his teachings out through him in the same way that the Buddha, who was the world teacher during the time of Prince Gautama, worked through the Prince Gautama. In that same way. Both instances, the Buddha worked through the Gautama Buddha, and then we could say that wisdom in its perfection had manifested itself in humanity for the first time during the time of Gautama Buddha. And then as Maitreya worked through Jesus, it could be said esoterically that the love nature of God manifested itself perfectly in humanity for the first time. Not the last time, but for the first time. But maybe even since that time it hasn't happened, but that's the first time it happened. Now, other disciples have their masters work through them telepathically too, but for the most disciples, they don't have that kind of relationship with these masters. But even on some of the artists of the Renaissance and so forth, it's been said that their masters work through them telepathically the same way that Jesus and Maitreya worked together, and so some of the paintings of the Renaissance painters and some of the music of Mozart and Beethoven and Bach, their masters worked through them to help, create that art, and that music. Other teachers like Benjamin Creme, Alice Bailey, Krishnamurti, they all had the same kind of relationship with their master the same way. And it's not so uncommon that it never happens, but it's not super common. You just have to look at the quality of the information of it. Now, in terms of the Bible, it's been said esoterically, and what James is saying is actually kind of true, that Jesus' role in the future, when he's out known for who he is after Maitreya declares himself as Maitreya on the day of declaration, one of his big jobs will be to help clean up the distortions in the Bible. Now, whether that happens quickly or not is all dependent upon humanity. I'm of the personal opinion that it's going to be a long time before the most ardent followers of the Bible actually trust the Master Jesus enough to listen to his advice and do what he says and change some of the distortions in it. For others, it might be easier. But Jesus can only advise, and the Master Jesus can only do that just as any of these other masters can do. It's going to be up for humanity to change it. But if you look at the teachings of Jesus, right? Let's talk about that for a second. That's why I think this is so important, what you're talking about. The two biggest things that I think Jesus really brought to humanity, at least to the Western world, not so much for the Eastern world, because Hindus were talking about it, Buddhists were talking about it, and so forth, but is the law of cause and effect and the law of rebirth, just as it's written in the other texts. But he brought it to the Christians and a billion people or so. So you could say that he brought it to Western civilization in a greater or lesser extent. But yet it was missed. They focus on the other stuff. They focus on the Ten Commandments. They focus on what Paul said about Jesus being the only true Son of God. They've totally missed the two biggest teachings I think that Jesus was bringing to humanity. What you sow shall you reap. So simple. Those who live by the sword shall die by the sword. A tree is known by its fruit. Those are three clear examples of Jesus talking about the law of cause and effect. Now, the other thing that's missed is Jesus talked about reincarnation. Now, it's been said that a lot of what he talked about was taken out purposely, by the churches because it smacked in the face of their own power. So they didn't want it in there. So imagine if the teachings of Jesus were left in there the way that he taught. What you sow shall you reap. Live harmlessly. And then also you'll get it, because just as I have, just as John the Baptist in these examples that they used, we came back, you'll get it. Jesus even said, greater things than this shall you do yourself. You know what I'm saying? But yet that's missed even by it. Only Jesus can do those things. Well, Jesus even himself said it. Now, if you look at, if the churches had taken that approach to humanity, they would never have gotten as rich, whether it's financially or power-wise, ever. Humanity would have been like, well, we can get it eventually. We don't need you. You know what I'm saying? Well, I can go find the kingdom of God out in nature. Really? That's, Jesus talked about that too. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, So it didn't seem like Jesus went to the church every single Sunday like most people. He seemed like he was kind of talking out there whenever he lived it. He didn't have to go to church. He even said that Sabbath is, God made the Sabbath for man, not man for the Sabbath. I mean, you could go on and on and on and on and on about it, but yet most fundamental Christians focus on the Old Testament, 10 Commandments, and what Paul said. Everything else is kind of woo-hoo. And so we would be living in a totally different world if the case was we focused on those two things. But when it comes to reincarnation, Jesus said it so casually, almost like he was, one of his disciples brought him French fries with ketchup on it. And he goes, don't you remember? I don't like ketchup on my fries. I mean, it was almost that kind of casual. When they came to him and they asked him about John the Baptist, who was John the Baptist? Who was John the Baptist? He goes, don't you remember what I said? He's Elijah come back again? Very casually. So casually that it's missed by people. And then he even turned around and asked his disciples, who do the people say that I am? And they rattled off a whole list of people that they thought that he was, right? Just kind of like almost casual conversation on it. And then there was another instance with the beggar that was born blind, and Peter looked at him and he goes, was that because of something that he did or his father did? And yet that's missed. So there's several instances in there where he talks about it. And the other one that is missed, even I think by that talks about reincarnation in kind of a roundabout way, is when Jesus talked and said, greater things than this shall you do yourself. He was talking about the evolution of the human species, and that we will do greater things than this, because we're destined to manifest our divinity in the same way that he did, and does, so that's where I think that he'll start to touch on that and say, no, I didn't really mean it like that. I meant it like this. And this is and that's where I think he's going to do. But like, again, I think it's going to be a long time before the vast majority of followers of the Bible, and I'm putting it like that, to saying it like that literally, take what Jesus says seriously. They just won't trust it. They'll think that he's maybe not the Antichrist, but he's one of his henchmen. That's the way they're going to kind of approach it, at least at first. Now, there were a few comments that came my way based on an interview that I did with my friend Dick Larson. Now, in this interview, it's 5 ways to know if you possibly had an experience with Maitreya or one of these masters. And I hope you go back and listen to it, because Dick Larson, when he talked about it, as much as I know this information and read about it, no one's ever said this. But if you look at it, and I started thinking back to the times that I've had experiences with these masters and with Maitreya, every single one of those things that almost happen every single time. Especially the joy. Like you meet somebody, whether it's a casual kind of, ordinary situation, and you're just filled with this sense of joy. You can't even explain it. And then there's an experience where you have these, like, and I'm going to read about one where you can't get it out of your mind. You can't forget it. And we all have experiences all the time where somebody might wave at us and we feel better about ourselves or feel better about the day, but it's not the same. You can't get it out of your mind. And then he talked about a lot of times it might be the eyes that you recognize or something like that. And then they might say something to only you that only you would know, about yourself or something, which is, I can definitely attest to. And then, and it might be an ordinary situation. Somebody smiles and waves at you. You're filled with joy, and all of a sudden you forget all about your troubles for whatever reason. And then you turn around and that person's gone. You're like, where did they go? And there's no way that they could have just run away that quickly, and it's like in the movies, where the person's standing on the street and then the bus passes and then they disappear. Like, where are they? It's just like that, but yet in real life. And when he explained it, I was like, yes, that's it. So the reason why he talked about it, and the reason why I was so excited for him to mention it, is because a lot of people have had experiences with these masters and probably didn't even realize it. You might have had it. More than likely, anybody, that's listening to this information could have had an experience or two like this where you just didn't even think anything of it. It could have been a dream experience, a dream that, like any other dream, but yet you can't get this other dream out of your mind, and it kind of impacted you in a way that other dreams don't. That could have been an experience from one of these masters. That's how they work, too, to communicate with us. But it's a way of them starting to kind of connect with humanity more and more and more and more and more. I'm saying this only because I'm the one talking here. I'm not the only one that's having these experiences. There are millions of people, maybe even tens, maybe even hundreds of millions of people now who've had these experiences, just like I have. And if you know this information, and why it's important to know this information is because it might help you remember, and this is what these people were talking about. So, David, I'm just going to read the end of it because he talked about something. He was coming back from a Share National event. And then he said about 3.5 weeks later, after the incident, he said he was driving to Dublin, was passing through a small town called Cashel. Actually, maybe I should read it back from the back. I'll read the whole thing. I was going to paraphrase it, but I think I might be missing some key plot points here. He said, I had such an experience, although never confirmed by Benjamin Creme. It was in 2001. At the time, I was doing a lot of meditation, and about 1.5 months previously, I came across a stand at a New Age natural health spiritual stand at a fair in my home city of Cork, Ireland. It was regarding Share International, Maitreya's Masters of Wisdom, Benjamin Creme, etc., and something penetrated my heart when I set my eyes on it. The facilitator of the stand was incredibly pleasant and kind, and even gave one of Benjamin Creme's books free of charge as a gift to me. That's when my outlook on life changed. I certainly attest to that. I can relate to that. Is what I mean. About 3 to 4 weeks later is what he said. After the incident, I was driving to Dublin, capital Ireland, was passing through a small town called Cashel. If I'm not pronouncing that right, I'm sorry. And I had the most surreal spiritual experience as I was driving through the town center. A middle-aged lady with the most heavenly blue eyes standing next to a pedestrian traffic light waves her hand in such a kind and loving gesture that 20 years later, I've never forgotten the experience and was almost out of body, etc. In my honest opinion, I do believe it was a master of wisdom. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that's what Dick Larson was talking about. So hopefully you'll take the time to go back and listen to his wonderful interview. And then there were some other people that mentioned that it triggered a memory that they had, but they didn't go into any detail. I do encourage those people. One was Emily, I think, Emily Cappy. If you're listening, talk about it, post it. If you want to email it to me, if you give me permission, I can talk about it, and hopefully it will help trigger other people. It's for all of us. We don't have to necessarily claim that it came from a master, but it could have been. I don't know, but hopefully it will help to trigger some of these memories that people have. And then, lastly, somebody wrote, back in 2009, I saw 2 shining suns atop our house rooftop. Is that a sign too? Could be. Unfortunately, Benjamin Creme's not alive to answer such a question. He could have answered it rather easily. More than likely, if it was a UFO or 2 UFOs. That seems to be their MO. Around maybe 8 years or so ago, I was driving with my family north of Atlanta, and I could see the skyline in Atlanta, and it was kind of getting close to dark, but not quite dark. And there were 3 huge lights over Atlanta. They look like stadium lights, like you would see in a stadium, soccer stadium, football stadium, baseball stadium. And you know how if you're kind of close to those lights, it can penetrate your eyes where it kind of is hard to see. These didn't hurt my eyes, but yet they were just as bright. But the city of Atlanta was 10, 15 miles away from where I was. At least 10 miles away. So the lights were huge, and it was quite extraordinary. So I can see what you're saying. And those were UFOs. So anyway, more than likely it was a UFO, but I can't say for either way. That's for you to decide. So, but thank you for sharing that. All right, and then I'm gonna read this article entitled "New Light, New Understanding." This article was written and published in Share International some years ago. I believe it was written by one of these masters. You don't have to believe that, but if you do want to know more about this information, go to the Share International website and read some of these articles that may or may not be coming from one of these masters. And I'm only putting it like that because I'm trying to keep it open, okay? But you don't have to believe that it's coming from a master for it to have value for you. But anyway, this talks about why the masters are coming back now. So, each age brings to humanity a new challenge and opportunity. The dawning age of Aquarius will present men with challenges and opportunities in such abundance that before its end, giant strides along the evolutionary path will have been taken by all. We are now at a turning point not only of the present world situation, but also in the destiny of the ancient race of men. Humanity stands poised now to enter consciously into a new dimension of life. For 5 long centuries, the masters have awaited this time, ready to add their gifts and wisdom to the efforts of man. Knowingly or not, men have outstripped themselves, and against all expectations, men have become ready for a new revelation, ready to receive new light and knowledge, to see new meaning and purpose in their lives, and to demonstrate this growing awareness in technologies, sciences, and relationships altogether new. Not for nothing has it been said, when the pupil is ready, the master comes. This is as true on a mass as on an individual scale. Today, humanity as pupil, as world disciple, tested and tried, is ready to enter into new life, the life of service to the race. The shift in consciousness now taking place will reveal to men that their sense of separation is illusion, that not exists in all creation, unconnected to the whole. The dawning awareness and readiness for change of men has invoked the teacher and the teachers, for such we are. Under our wise counsel, men will find themselves galvanized into action in every department of life. Soon the changes will be there for all to see. Soon the representative of God will establish himself firmly in the hearts of all mankind. Responding to his stimulus, humanity will seek ways to implement the new directions which his presence will reveal, and order their lives according to a new and higher rhythm. When Maitreya reveals himself before the world, statesmen of every nation will gather for advice, and a new realism will reflect itself in their decisions. His call to action will resound throughout the earth, evoking response from young and old, rich and poor, firm and halt. Never before in Earth's history has such a time been known. The planet galvanized to act together for the good of all. Many who know him now already hearken to his call. Inspired by their experience of his presence, they dedicate their lives to service and ready themselves to follow his lead. Thus will it be when all shall know him, when he presents himself as teacher for all nations, and takes upon himself the task for which he has returned, the salvation of the peoples, the revealer of new light, new understanding to men. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.